Ainsley.
The fluorescent bulb flickered, once, twice, then steadied into a sickly yellow that painted everything the color of old bruises. Ainsley Garrett didn't blink. She sat strapped to a steel chair in the center of a concrete room, wrists zip-tied behind her back, ankles bound to the chair legs with restraints that had been welded to the frame. Professional, permanent, the kind that told you someone had done this before and planned to do it again. Sweat traced lines through the dust on her face. Blood dried now brown at the edges, crusted beneath her nose, and at the corner of her mouth where she'd bitten through her lip somewhere around hour 32. Her hospital scrubs, pale blue when this started, were now mapped with stains she didn't think about. The generator in the corner hummed its endless song. 68 hours, no food, no sleep. Just water enough to keep her conscious, not enough to dull the edges of what they were doing to her. And what they were doing had a name. The cables snaked across the concrete floor like patient serpents ending in alligator clips, attached to contact points on the chair. Medical-grade electrodes. The kind designed to deliver precise voltage without killing. Not immediately, anyway. The man standing in front of her knew exactly what he was doing. Nicolai Konstantin was 48 years old, 6'2", with the build of someone who'd spent a lifetime turning violence into currency. A scar ran from his right eyebrow to his cheekbone, pale and puckered, the kind of wound that spoke of something sharp and personal. His accent carried the frost of Moscow winters, though he'd been working the Texas-Mexico corridor for the better part of a decade. He tilted his head, studying her like a mechanic studying an engine that refused to quit. 68 hours, he said. His voice was almost gentle, almost curious. No food, no sleep. 53 shocks. He paused, letting the number settle. Why won't you scream? Ainsley's eyes, gray steady as stone, met his without flinching. She said nothing. Konstantin's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You should be begging by now, crying, offering me anything I want. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the cigarette smoke clinging to his jacket. But you just sit there. Behind him, two men flanked the door. Pavel, thin, nervous energy, the tech specialist who monitored the voltage, and Sergei, a wall of muscle, who hadn't spoken once in 3 days. They'd been rotating shifts, sleeping, eating, living, while she endured. Konstantin crouched down until his eyes were level with hers. What are you? Ainsley's voice came out raw, scraped across gravel. A nurse. No, Konstantin shook his head slowly. Nurses break, soldiers break, everyone breaks. His finger traced a line in front of her face, not quite touching. But not you. He stood turned to Pavel. Again. Pavel's hand moved to the dial. The generator's hum changed pitch. And then the world became electricity. It started in her wrists, a sensation like being dipped in liquid fire. The current raced up her arms, seized her chest, turned her muscles into cables pulled too tight. Her spine arched involuntarily, her jaw locked. Somewhere in the roaring static that filled her skull, a voice that might have been hers tried to scream, but her throat was frozen shut. 15 seconds, an eternity compressed into the space between heartbeats. When it stopped, she collapsed forward as far as the restraints allowed, gasping. Her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to escape. Sweat dripped from her nose to the concrete between her feet, each drop a small dark star. Where, Konstantin said calmly, is the cash? Ainsley's head hung forward. She couldn't answer yet, couldn't form words. Her tongue felt thick and useless. Konstantin waited. 30 seconds? A minute. I don't... The words came in pieces. Know what you're talking about. Konstantin sighed, not frustrated, not angry, just patient. He had 3 days after all. Pavel. The second shock lasted 20 seconds. 72 hours earlier. The night shift at Laredo Medical Center had a particular quality of silence. Not the absence of sound, there was always sound, the ventilators wheeze in room 4, the steady beep of monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum, but a weighted quiet that settled over everything after midnight. The quality of a held breath. Ainsley Garrett moved through it like smoke. 27 years old, 5'6", with dark blonde hair, pulled back in a knot that hadn't been neat for the last 6 hours of her shift. She wore pale blue scrubs and white sneakers that had seen better days, and she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of someone who'd learned not to waste energy. Room 7. Post-op appendectomy, stable vitals due for a check in 15 minutes, but Ainsley was early because she was always early. She pushed the door open with her shoulder hands full with a tray of fresh eye bags. The patient, Marcus Reeves, 53, insurance adjuster, wedding ring worn thin on one side from 30 years of worried fidgeting, was sleeping. Good. Sleep was the best medicine, and the only one that didn't come with side effects. She moved to the IV stand, swapped the bags with practiced efficiency, checked the line for air bubbles she knew wouldn't be there, adjusted the drip rate that didn't need adjusting. Her hands knew the work. Her eyes did something else. They cataloged the room in the way most people didn't notice. 2 exits, the door she'd entered through, and the window, 3rd floor, climbable if you had to. The IV stand could be used as a weapon. The oxygen tank in the corner, if compromised, would become a problem. She noticed, calculated, filed away, and then pushed it all back down into the place where she kept the things that didn't belong to Nurse Garrett. "Evening, Mr. Reeves," she said quietly, even though he couldn't hear her. Habit, respect for the sleeping. She made a note on his chart: vitals stable, no fever, incision clean, and turned to leave. The door opened before she reached it. Sarah Mendez, fellow night nurse, 42 years old, and the closest thing Ainsley had to a friend here, stuck her head in. "Coffee run, you want?" "I'm good." "You're never good. You're always working." Sarah stepped fully into the room, lowered her voice. "You eat today?" "I ate. A granola bar from the vending machine doesn't count." Ainsley managed a small smile. "It had peanuts, protein." Sarah studied her with the kind of look that saw too much. "You know what you remind me of." "What?" "My brother did 2 tours in Afghanistan, came back and couldn't sit with his back to a door." Sarah nodded toward where Ainsley had unconsciously positioned herself, back to the wall, clear sight line to both exits. "You got that same watchfulness." For just a moment, something flickered across Ainsley's face. Something old and buried. Then it was gone. "Just careful," Ainsley said. "Careful like you've been to war." "Something like that." Ainsley moved past her toward the door. "I'll take that coffee. Black." "Everything with you is black." "Easier that way." Ainsley's locker was in the staff room at the end of the hall, next to the water cooler that hadn't worked in 3 months, and the bulletin board covered in shift schedules and a faded poster about hand-washing protocol. She spun the combination lock, right 23 left, 14, right 8, and opened the metal door. Inside, a spare set of scrubs, a protein bar, a dog-eared paperback she'd been reading for 2 months without getting past page 47. And on the inside of the door, taped carefully, a photograph. The photograph was 4 years old, creased at the corners from being folded and unfolded too many times. 2 people stood in front of a desert sunset somewhere in West Texas, where the land went flat and hard and endless. One was Ainsley, younger, wearing Navy fatigues and a smile that looked less practiced than the one she wore now. The other was a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with a face carved from old leather and eyes that had seen things most people only had nightmares about. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs. Flint, they'd called him. Because he was hard. Because he sparked. Because he'd taught her everything about survival except how to survive losing him. Ainsley's finger traced the edge of the photo, didn't touch his face. That felt too much like goodbye, and she'd said that already. 4 years ago, in a warehouse in West Texas where the walls were concrete and the air smelled like cordite and blood, where she'd held his hand while he died and promised him something she was still trying to keep. She closed the locker, spun the lock, pushed it down. The past was a locked room and she didn't have visiting hours. The coffee was terrible. Sarah handed her a styrofoam cup filled with something that claimed to be French roast, but tasted like it had been filtered through a tire fire. Ainsley drank it anyway. Fuel was fuel. "So," Sarah said, perching on the edge of the nurse's station desk, "you doing anything this weekend?" "Maybe." "That means no." "That means maybe." Sarah rolled her eyes. "You need a life, Garrett. You're 27, you should be out there, living, dating, making mistakes." "I've made plenty of mistakes. I mean new ones." Ainsley almost smiled. "I'll think about it." "No, you won't." Sarah took a long sip of her own coffee, grimaced. "God, this is awful. Why do we drink this?" "Because it's here." "Solid reasoning." Sarah set the cup down, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Actually, speaking of weekend plans, you still doing that volunteer thing?" Ainsley nodded. "Border Aid Coalition, tomorrow morning." "That the medical outreach program?" "Yeah, we drive out to the border communities, provide basic health care. A lot of people out there don't have access." Sarah's face did something complicated. "That's good work. Really good. But be careful out there, okay? It's not exactly safe." "Nowhere's exactly safe." "Yeah, but some places are less safe than others. Cartels, trafficking, all that." Sarah waved a hand vaguely at the concept of violence. Just watch your back. Ainsley's smile was small and didn't reach her eyes. Always do. She didn't sleep well. Then again, she never did. Her apartment was a studio on the third floor of a building that had been recently renovated, according to the landlord, which meant they'd painted over the water stains and called it good. One room, kitchenette, bathroom with a shower that ran cold after 4 minutes, and a fire escape outside the window that she'd tested the first night she moved in, just in case. The bed sat in the corner position so she could see the door and the window simultaneously. A habit she'd tried to break and failed. Some things were written into muscle memory deeper than conscious thought. She lay in the dark staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around her. Footsteps in the apartment above. A car alarm 3 blocks away. The distant wail of a siren heading somewhere that needed it more than here. Sleep came in pieces. And when it did, it brought the dreams. West Texas, February 2022. Desert night stars like broken glass scattered across black velvet. Ainsley was 23 years old and kneeling in sand that had gone dark with blood. Flint Briggs lay in front of her, 3 bullet wounds in his chest, arranged in a triangle that told her everything she needed to know about distance and accuracy and how little time he had left. Ash. His voice was wet, bubbling. Lung shot. Maybe both lungs. Don't talk, she said, hands already working pressure bandages that they both knew wouldn't be enough. Save your strength. The cash. Each word cost him. Coordinates. 29.8 north, 103.1 west. I'll get it, Gunny, after we get you out. His hand, calloused, scarred, steady, even now grabbed her wrist. No, destroy it. What bioweapon? He coughed blood on his teeth. Stolen from Fort Detrick. If they get it. Gunfire erupted to their left. Ainsley turned her head, saw movement in the shadows. Saw the girl, 8 years old, informant's daughter, running. Then the muzzle flash. The girl went down. No! Ainsley started to move. Flint's grip tightened on her wrist. His other hand came up, grabbed her face, forced her to look at him. The cash first, he said. Blood bubbled at his lips. Promise me. Destroy it. But she, the girl. Promise? His eyes bored into hers. Gray meeting gray. Coordinates. 29.8 north, 103.1 west. Destroy it. Then save who you can. Ainsley's throat closed. She looked at the girl, at Flint, at the impossible choice. I promise, she whispered. You were, Flint coughed. More blood. The best student I ever had. Finish this. His hand fell away. The light went out of his eyes like someone switching off a lamp. And Ainsley Garrett, 23 years old, kneeling in the desert, turned to the girl. Ran, 30 seconds too late. The girl's name was Sophia. She had dark hair and eyes too big for her face, and she was trying to say something, but blood filled her mouth. Ainsley's hands moved on autopsy. Pressure. Bandages. Futile attempts to stop bleeding that wouldn't stop. It's okay, Ainsley said, even though it wasn't. You're okay. Sophia's hand found hers, small, cold, squeezing. Am I dying? Ainsley's training said lie. Her heart said truth. She chose truth. Yes. Will it hurt? No, sweetheart, not for much longer. Sophia's eyes found hers. Don't leave me. I won't. Ainsley held her hand until the squeezing stopped, until the girl's eyes went somewhere Ainsley couldn't follow. And then she sat in the desert with 2 bodies, one who'd taught her everything, one she'd failed to save, and made a promise to both of them. Finish this. She woke at 600 sharp, no alarm needed. The sky outside was the gray of old concrete. Saturday, September 14th, 2026. The day everything would change. She just didn't know it yet. The Border Aid Coalition met in the parking lot of a Baptist church on the south side of Laredo, where the buildings got smaller and the yards got dustier, and the optimism of urban planning gave up entirely. 4 vehicles, 12 volunteers, enough medical supplies to run a field clinic for a day. Ainsley arrived 15 minutes early in her 10-year-old Honda Civic that burned oil and made a sound like a dying accordion when she turned left. But it ran, and running was all that mattered. She parked in the shade of a mesquite tree and watched the others arrive. Dr. Raymond Fisher was first. 62 years old, semi-retired, with the kind of face that looked like it had been designed to deliver bad news gently. He'd been running the coalition for 8 years, ever since his wife passed, and he'd needed something to fill the space she'd left. He drove a Ford F-150 with a medical cross stickered on the tailgate. He waved when he saw Ainsley. She waved back. Then came the others. Came the mom. Volunteers who rotated in and out, some staying for months, others lasting one trip before the reality of it sent them back to their comfortable lives. Today's crew included 2 medical students from UT San Antonio, eager and nervous in the way of people who'd read a lot of textbooks but hadn't seen much blood. And then there was Beth Turner. Beth was 32, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a coalition t-shirt. She'd been volunteering for 2 years, ever since her husband deployed to somewhere she wasn't allowed to talk about and stopped coming home. And beside her, holding her hand, was Lily, 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, pink backpack covered in unicorn stickers. Ainsley's breath caught when she saw her. Not because Lily looked like Sophia, she didn't, not really. Different hair, different eyes, different everything. But the age was the same, 8 years old. The age where you still believed brave people kept you safe. "Morning, Ainsley," Beth said. "You see, morning. You remember, Lily. School's out and I couldn't get a sitter, so..." Beth gave an apologetic shrug. Ainsley looked down at the girl. Lily looked back up with eyes that were too big and too trusting for a world that broke people. "Hi," Lily said. "Hi. Are you a doctor?" "Nurse." "That's cool. I want to be a veterinarian." "That's good work. Because animals can't tell you what's wrong, so you have to figure it out. Like detectives." Ainsley's throat tightened. Exactly like that. They loaded the vehicle's medical supplies, folding tables, boxes of donated clothes and hygiene products, and by 0730 they were rolling south on Highway 83 toward the border. Ainsley rode in the second vehicle with Dr. Fisher driving Beth and Lily in the back seat, and one of the medical students, Jake 24 Ernest, to the point of exhaustion, riding shotgun. The landscape slid past the windows. Scrub brush. Mesquite trees twisted by wind into shapes like arthritic hands. The occasional ranch house set back from the road, surrounded by nothing. Ainsley watched it all from the passenger seat, her eyes cataloging without conscious thought. 1 mile out, gas station, 2 pumps closed. 3 miles abandoned barn roof, caved in, good cover if needed. 7 miles cell tower, line of sight for approximately 12 miles in clear weather. "Beautiful out here," Jake said, trying to make conversation. In a desolate kind of way. You do this a lot, volunteer." "When I can." "That's cool. Really cool. I mean, a lot of people talk about helping, but you're actually doing it, you know." Ainsley nodded, still watching the landscape. And that's when she saw it. A black pickup truck, Ford F-250, tinted windows, Texas plates hanging back about a quarter mile. It had been there since they left the church, following at exactly the same speed, maintaining exactly the same distance. Professional. Her hand moved unconsciously toward her medical bag on the floor between her feet. Inside, bandages, antiseptic painkillers, and a scalpel. Small, sharp, sterile, insufficient. Ainsley, Dr. Fisher glanced at her. "You okay?" "Fine." She kept her voice level. "Just thinking." But her eyes stayed on the side mirror. The truck stayed back there, following. They reached the village, though calling it a village was generous, around 0900. A collection of structures that had started life as temporary and accepted their permanence with resignation. Corrugated metal roofs, plywood walls, tarps strung between posts to create shade. 50, maybe 60 people lived here, most of them working the ranches and farms that spread across the border region, invisible to everyone except the people who needed them to be. The coalition set up in the center of the settlement, unfolding tables, arranging supplies, creating a makeshift clinic out of folding chairs and good intentions. People began to line up almost immediately. An elderly woman with a cough that had settled into her chest like sediment. A teenage boy with a gash on his forearm from barbed wire that should have had stitches a week ago. A mother with 3 children, all of them running fevers. Ainsley worked the triage table, assessing, prioritizing, moving people through the system with quiet efficiency. "What's your name?" she asked a girl, maybe 12, holding her arm at an odd angle. "Rosa." "Rosa, I'm going to need to look at your wrist, okay? Can you move your fingers for me?" The girl tried, winced. Possible fracture. Ainsley made a note, sent her to Dr. Fisher. Next patient, and the next, and the next. The work had a rhythm to it, a purpose. It filled the spaces where other thoughts tried to creep in. Lily appeared at Ainsley's elbow around 1100, holding a bottle of water. "Mom said you should drink this, because it's hot." Ainsley took it. "Thanks. Are you good at being a nurse?" "I try to be." "Mom says you used to be in the Navy, like a soldier." Ainsley unscrewed the cap, took a long drink. "Not exactly like a soldier. I was a hospital corpsman. I took care of soldiers." "Did they get hurt a lot?" "Sometimes." "Were you scared?" Ainsley looked down at the girl, at those big, trusting eyes. Sometimes, she said again, but you helped them anyway. That was the job. Lily nodded solemnly, like this confirmed something she'd suspected. I think that's brave. Before Ainsley could respond, Beth called from across the clinic. Lily, don't bother Nurse Garrett. She's not bothering me. But Lily skipped away anyway, back to her mother, back to the safety of being 8 years old and believing that brave people kept you safe. Ainsley watched her go, and didn't notice the black pickup truck that had parked on the ridge a half-mile away. The first sign of trouble came at 11:47. Ainsley was suturing a laceration on a ranch hand's shoulder, clean cut, probably from sheet metal. 6 stitches would do it when the sound of engines cut through the afternoon heat. Not one engine. 3. She looked up. 3 black SUVs, Chevy Suburbans, tinted windows coming fast down the dirt road that led to the settlement. Not slowing, not stopping. Ainsley's hands kept working through a round pull knot, but her eyes tracked the vehicles. Around her, the volunteers were still working, still talking, still oblivious. The SUV stopped in a loose semicircle around the clinic, engines idling. Doors opened. 9 men stepped out, all of them armed. Tactical gear, not military, but close enough. AK variants, sidearms visible. Body language that spoke of training and the willingness to use it. The one who emerged from the lead vehicle last was different. Taller, older, moved with the kind of economy that came from years of violence refined into efficiency. Nicolai Konstantin. He surveyed the clinic with eyes that cataloged and calculated, and when those eyes found Ainsley, they stopped. And something in his expression shifted. Recognition. Dr. Fisher stepped forward, hands raised in the universal gesture of non-threat. Gentlemen, we're just medical volunteers. We're not looking for any trouble. Konstantin ignored him. His eyes stayed on Ainsley. She'd stopped suturing. Her hands were still. Her face was calm. But inside her mind was moving at combat speed. 9 hostiles, 4 volunteers plus patients, weapons, scalpel in her pocket, scissors on the table, nothing that mattered against automatic weapons. Exits 2 both blocked. Cover minimal, chance of successful resistance less than 5%. Chance of civilian casualties if she fought 100%. The math was simple. The choice was simpler. Konstantin walked forward slowly, his boots crunching on gravel. He stopped 10 feet from Ainsley's table. You, he said. His accent turned the vowel into something sharp. The nurse obeys. Ainsley stood slowly, kept her hands visible. Can I help you? Yes. He smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. You can come with us. Jake, the medical student, stepped forward. Now hold on. One of Konstantin's men moved quick as a snake, and the butt of an AK caught Jake across the jaw. He went down, hard blood and spit hitting the dust. Beth screamed. Lily started crying. Anyone else? Konstantin looked around. Anyone else wants to be hero? Uyo. Silence. Konstantin's eyes came back to Ainsley. You come, now, or we kill everyone, starting with child. He wasn't bluffing. She could see it in the flat, empty spaces behind his eyes. The place where empathy had been and wasn't anymore. Ainsley's voice came out level. I'll go. Ainsley, no, Dr. Fisher started. I'll go, she repeated, louder, firmer. Don't follow. Don't call the police. Just go home. She looked at Beth, at Lily, whose face was streaked with tears. Ainsley crouched down until she was eye level with the girl. Close your eyes, sweetie, Ainsley said gently. Can you do that for me? Lily nodded, sobbing. Close them tight, and don't open them until your mom says it's okay. Lily squeezed her eyes shut. Ainsley stood, walked toward Konstantin with her hands loose at her sides, and her mind already 3 moves ahead, cataloging, calculating, preparing for the moment when the math might change. 2 of Konstantin's men grabbed her arms, flex-cuffed her wrists behind her back, pushed her toward the middle SUV. Before they put her inside, Konstantin leaned close. Do you know why we take you? He asked. No. His smile was cold and satisfied. Because we know who you are, Corpsman Garrett. The name hit her like cold water. A name she hadn't used in 2 years. A name from another life. He saw her face change. Saw the flicker of recognition. Saw the confirmation he needed. Yes, he said softly. We know exactly who you are. They shoved her into the SUV. The door slammed. Through the tinted window, she saw Dr. Fisher helping Jake to his feet. Saw Beth holding Lily tight. The girl's eyes still squeezed shut like Ainsley had told her. The engine started. The SUV pulled away. And Ainsley Garrett disappeared into the West Texas desert like smoke. 16 minutes. That's how long the drive lasted. Ainsley counted every second. 16 minutes at an average speed of 68 miles per hour, accounting for 2 turns and 1 brief deceleration, meant approximately 18 miles southwest of the settlement. She sat between 2 guards, Pavel on her left. Younger, nervous energy, kept checking his phone. Sergei on her right, solid as concrete, hadn't blinked once. Konstantin sat in the front passenger seat, occasionally glancing back at her in the rearview mirror. She kept her face blank, gave him nothing. But her mind was mapping terrain, calculating distances, building a 3-dimensional model of where they were and how she'd get out, if she'd get out. The SUV bounced over a cattle guard and the landscape opened up into something flat and vast and empty. An old industrial complex rose out of the dust like a tombstone, 3 buildings, corrugated metal and concrete windows, either broken or boarded. They pulled up to the middle building. The door opened. Hands grabbed her, pulled her out into heat that hit like a wall. Inside, Konstantin said. They walked her through a bay door that had rusted half off its track into a space that had been a warehouse once and was now just hollow. Concrete floor, steel support beams, the smell of old motor oil and dust. And in the center, waiting like a throne, a steel chair. Industrial, bolted to the floor, restraint points welded onto the arms and legs. Professional. This wasn't improvised. This was prepared. They pushed her down into the chair, secured her wrists to the arms with zip ties so tight they bit into skin, her ankles to the legs. Konstantin stood in front of her patient, waiting until she was completely immobilized. Then he pulled up a folding chair and sat down facing her, close enough to touch. "You know why you're here, Corpsman Garrett?" No. Liar. He said it without heat, just fact. "But that's okay. We will teach you to tell truth." He pulled a file folder from inside his jacket, set it on his lap, opened it slowly. Inside, photographs. The first one showed Ainsley in Navy fatigues, younger, standing in front of a Humvee, somewhere desert and foreign. Iraq, probably. The second showed her with a group of men, faces deliberately blurred, but the bearing unmistakable. Special operations. The third showed a man in his 50s. Broad shoulders, eyes that had seen everything. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs. Flint. Ainsley's face didn't change, but her breath did. Just for a second. Konstantin saw it, smiled. "Yes," he said. "We know about Briggs, your mentor, your teacher." He paused. "Your father figure." He pulled out another photograph. This one showed Flint on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood running down his face. The image quality suggested a cell phone camera. The expression on Flint's face suggested he knew exactly how this ended, and he was facing it with steel in his eyes. "We killed him," Konstantin said simply. 4 years ago, February 2022, Operation Crimson Dawn. "Does this sound familiar?" Ainsley said nothing. "He stole something from us. Something very valuable. We want it back." "I don't know what you're talking about." Konstantin stood, walked to the corner of the room where a generator sat like a patient dog. Next to it, a black case. He opened the case. Inside, cables, alligator clips, a voltage controller. "This," Konstantin said, "is where you tell me about the cake. What cam? The one Briggs hid before we killed him. Weapons, intel, bioweapon prototypes stolen from Fort Detrick." Konstantin attached the cables to the generator. "He told you where it is." "I know he did. You were with him when he died." Ainsley's throat was dry. "He didn't tell me anything." "Then we have a problem." Konstantin carried the cables over, attached the alligator clips to the chair's built-in contact points designed to press against wrists and ankles. "Because I will not stop until you talk." He nodded to Pavel. The generator coughed to life. "Last chance," Konstantin said. "Where is the cash?" Ainsley looked him in the eye, said nothing. "Very well." Pavel turned the dial. The first shock lasted 10 seconds. It felt like 10 years. Every muscle in her body seized. Her spine arched. Her jaw clamped shut hard enough that she tasted blood. The world became white noise and fire pain, without shape or definition, just existence reduced to suffering. When it stopped, she collapsed forward as far as the restraints allowed, gasping. Her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to escape. "Where is the cash?" She couldn't answer, couldn't form words. Her brain was still rebooting from the overload. Konstantin waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Then, again. The second shock lasted 15 seconds. Her vision went white. Her muscles locked. Somewhere deep in her mind, a voice, Flint's voice from SERE training, cut through the static. "Pain is your body's warning system. It's loud. It demands attention. But you decide what to do with that information. You decide if it owns you." The shock ended. She gasped air that felt like broken glass. Where is the cash? She forced the words out. Don't know. Third shock, 20 seconds. Fourth shock, 25 seconds. Fifth shock, 30 seconds. Sixth shock, 30 seconds again. After the sixth shock, her body finally gave up. She passed out. When she woke, Sergei was dumping ice water on her face. She coughed, choked, gasped air. Konstantin crouched in front of her. You are very strong, he said. Stronger than I expected. This is good. He stood. Because we have 3 days, he said, and I promise you, Corpsman Garrett, by the end you will beg to tell me everything. He turned to leave, paused at the door. No sleep, he told Pavel and Sergei. No food, water only to keep her conscious. Every time her head drops, shock her awake. He looked back at Ainsley. 3 days straight, he said. Let's see how strong you really are. The door closed, the generator kept humming, and Ainsley Garrett, alone in the dark and with men who wanted to break her, closed her eyes and thought of 2 promises. One to a man who'd taught her that steel didn't bend. One to a girl she'd failed to save. Breaking wasn't an option, not this time. Lieutenant Dalton Mercer was halfway through his cool-down run when his phone rang. He stopped hands on knees, breathing hard on the track behind the training facility. The San Diego sun was starting its slow descent toward the horizon, turning the sky copper and gold. The phone said, Commander Brooks. Dalton answered. Mercer? My office, now. Sir, The line was already dead. Line. Commander Brooks' office was on the 2nd floor of the operations building, with a view of the Pacific that probably looked inspirational in the brochures, but mostly just reminded everyone that the ocean was right there, vast and indifferent to whatever they did on land. Brooks was 55, former SEAL himself, with silver hair and the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He stood behind his desk, arms crossed, and he didn't sit down. Neither did Dalton. We have a situation, Brooks said. Sir. Brooks turned his computer monitor around. On the screen, a photograph of a woman in Navy fatigues. Mid-20s in the photo, probably a few years older now. Dark blonde hair, pulled back gray eyes that looked like they'd seen combat and come back different. Ainsley Garrett, Brooks said, former hospital corpsman attached to SEAL Team 3 from 2017 to 2024. Ring any bells? It rang more than bells. It rang every alarm Dalton had. Yes, sir, Dalton said carefully. I know her. How well? She saved my life. Iraq 2021. Brooks nodded slowly. Then you'll want to sit down for this. She's been kidnapped. The words landed like a punch. When 18 hours ago, Laredo, Texas, she was volunteering with a medical aid organization. Bratva Syndicate, Russian-linked 9-men professional operation. They took only her, left everyone else. Dalton's jaw tightened. They knew who she was. We believe so. Brooks pulled up another file. Ainsley's service record is clean. 4 years active duty, 17 deployments with special operations, 3 Bronze Stars and 1 Navy Cross recommendation that she refused. Refused? Said she was just doing her job. Brooks looked up. You knew she was attached to Delta for 2 operations. I knew she was good. She was exceptional. Medical expertise, small arms, qualified language skills, SERE certified. Brooks paused. And she was personally trained by Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs. The name hit Dalton hard. Flint Briggs, legend. The man who'd trained some of the most dangerous operators in the military and then died in West Texas doing something so classified that Dalton's clearance didn't touch it. Briggs trained her personally, Brooks continued. After he died in 2022, she submitted discharge papers 2 months later. No explanation, no exit interview, just left. What do they want with her? Intel. We think Briggs hid something before he died. A cache of weapons, possibly including bioweapon prototypes. The Bratva wants it. They think she knows where it is. Does she, Barman? Unknown? Brooks closed the file. What we do know is that they've had her for 18 hours, and they're not afraid to use extreme measures. FBI liaison says these people specialize in enhanced interrogation. The word Dalton heard was torture. We're putting together a team, Brooks said. 6 operators. Fast insertion surgical extraction. Your team leader. When do we leave? 0400 tomorrow. You have 12 hours to plan and 54 hours total to find her lieutenant. After that, Brooks didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. After 54 hours, people like Konstantin didn't keep hostages alive. The briefing room was cold and fluorescent and smelled like coffee and adrenaline. 5 other SEALs sat around the table, summoned from various corners of the base on 30 minutes' notice. Boone Mackenzie Breacher 34, built like a truck and about as subtle. Garrett Voss Sniper 31 from Montana could thread a bullet through a keyhole at 800 meters. Thatcher Kane Medic 29, former Army turned Navy, better at keeping people alive than anyone Dalton had ever seen. Wyatt Hollis Communications 33 could hack a satellite or pick a lock with equal enthusiasm. Reese Donovan Demolitions 36, Welsh accent, loved explosives the way other people loved golden retrievers. They looked at the photograph of Ainsley on the screen. Young, competent, eyes that suggested she'd seen things. "This is Corpsman Ainsley Garrett," Dalton said. "Call sign Doc, former Team 3 attachment, now civilian. Kidnapped 18 hours ago by a Brava splinter cell operating out of West Texas." He pulled up a map. "Last known location, border aid settlement, approximately 40 miles southwest of Laredo. From there, we lose her. FBI's got satellite coverage of the area, but it's sparse. We're working with 3 potential locations." Garrett leaned forward. "What's the motivation?" "They think she knows the location of a weapons cache hidden by her former mentor, Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs. Briggs was KYA 4 years ago during Operation Crimson Dawn. Before he died, he allegedly told Garrett where he'd hidden classified material, including a bioweapon prototype." "Did he?" Boone asked. "Don't know, don't care. Our job is to get her out, not evaluate intelligence." Thatcher raised a hand. "Medical condition, if she's been in hostile custody for 18 hours. Unknown, assume worst case scenario. Dehydration, trauma, possible torture. Be ready for immediate medical intervention and extended evac if she can't walk." "What's our window?" Wyatt asked. 54 hours from now. After that, FBI assessment says they'll likely execute her." The room went quiet. "Questions?" Dalton looked around. Reese spoke up, accent thick. "Yeah, you know this woman personally?" Dalton hesitated, then decided they deserved the truth. "Iraq 2021, he said. "Fallujah. My team got ambushed during a compound raid. I took a 7.62 round through the femoral artery. Should have bled out in under 3 minutes." He pointed at Ainsley's photograph on the screen. She was our attached corpsman, 25 years old, under fire from 3 directions. She tourniqueted the wound, clamped the artery with her fingers, and sutured it closed while lying on top of me to shield me from incoming rounds. Then she dragged me at 200 meters to the exfil point, by herself. He paused. "I spent 2 days unconscious. When I woke up in the field hospital in Baghdad, she was sitting in a chair next to my bed reading a paperback. I asked her why she stayed. She said, 'Someone had to make sure you didn't die of boredom, LT.' Silence. "This woman doesn't quit," Dalton said quietly. "She doesn't break. And she sure as hell doesn't deserve to die in a basement in Texas because some Russian wants revenge." Garrett nodded slowly. "What's the op called?" Dalton looked at the photo of Ainsley, at those gray eyes that had seen combat and chosen to keep saving people anyway. "Operation Steel," he said. "Because she doesn't break?" Wyatt asked. "Because she's Flint Briggs' student," Dalton said. "And Flint didn't train people. He forged them." The room absorbed that. "Wheels up at 0400, Dalton said. "Get your gear. Get your heads right. We're bringing her home." The team filed out. Dalton stayed. He pulled Ainsley's file up on his tablet, scrolled through pages of deployments and commendations. But it was the last entry that stopped him cold. Final deployment in Operation Crimson Dawn, West Texas. February 2022. Classified. Status: honorable discharge, April 2024. Reason for discharge: redacted. 2 years. She'd disappeared for 2 years. What happened out there? Doc Dalton thought. What did you see that made you leave? He closed the file. Didn't matter. He'd find her. And then maybe she'd tell him. Ainsley's head snapped up. Brief shock. Just enough voltage to jolt her nervous system back online. She'd been drifting, not sleep exactly, but the body's desperate attempt to conserve energy, to shut down non-essential systems and focus on survival. Konstantin didn't allow survival strategies. "No sleeping," Pavel said from his chair in the corner. He held the voltage controller like a TV remote, casual, bored. Sergei stood by the door, arms crossed, expressionless. The generator hummed. 22 hours. Ainsley's internal clock was still working, even if the rest of her felt like it was coming apart at the molecular level. No food, minimal water, 14 shock sessions, and the real torture hadn't even started yet. Her wrists were raw where the zip ties cut in, her ankles the same. Everything hurt, not sharp injury pain, but the deep grinding ache of muscles held in tension too long of a body being systematically worn down. She focused on breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, the technique Flint had taught her. Your body's going to scream at you, his voice said in her memory. It's going to tell you this is unbearable. But pain is just your nervous system doing its job. Acknowledge it, then ignore it. She acknowledged it, then ignored it. The door opened. Konstantin entered carrying a bottle of water and a photograph. He unscrewed the cap, held the bottle to her lips. Drink. She did, not because she wanted to, because dehydration would kill her faster than the shocks and dying wasn't part of the plan. He pulled the bottle away after 5 seconds. Good. Then he showed her the photograph. Flint, on his knees, zip-tied, bleeding, but his eyes still defiant, still steel. This was 4 years ago, Konstantin said. West Texas. My brother Victor was there. You killed him. Ainsley said nothing. He was 29 years old, 3 children, a wife. You took him from them. Her voice came out rough as gravel. He was trying to kill my team. And you succeeded. Konstantin studied the photograph like it was art. One shot, center mass, very professional. He looked at her. My brother died protecting what was his. Now I protect what is mine. The cash that Briggs stole, where is it? I don't know. Yes, you do. He set the photograph on her lap. But we have time, 50 hours, plenty of time to help you remember. He turned to leave. Wait, Ainsley said. He stopped. Why only me, she asked. Why not take the others, the doctor, the volunteers? Konstantin smiled. Because you are the only one who matters, the only one Briggs would have trusted. How do you know he trusted me? Because he loved you like a daughter, and fathers always tell their daughters their secrets. The door closed. Ainsley looked down at the photograph of Flint. Bloody, beaten, about to die, but still looking at the camera like he'd won. And she understood why. Because they could kill him, but they couldn't break him. Just like they could torture her, but they couldn't make her betray what he'd died protecting. She thought about the promise. Finish this. She was trying, Gunny. God, she was trying. The human body has limits. Not the kind written in textbooks or measured in laboratories, but real limits. The places where biology stops being theoretical and starts being survival. Where the nervous system begins cannibalizing itself for energy. Where the mind, starved of sleep, starts seeing things that aren't there. Ainsley Garrett had studied those limits in medical school. Now she was living them. 24 hours. One full rotation of the earth. Time enough for most people to sleep, eat, work, live a life that felt normal and continuous and safe. She'd spent it strapped to a steel chair in a concrete room being systematically dismantled. 17 shocks now, each one calibrated just below the threshold that would stop her heart. Pavel had gotten good at finding that sweet spot, the voltage that made every nerve ending scream without quite killing her. The generator hummed its endless song. Ainsley's head hung forward, a chin nearly touching her chest. Her hair had come loose from its knot somewhere around hour 12, falling in sweat, dampened strands across her face. Blood from her bitten lip had dried in a dark line down her chin. She looked broken. She wasn't. Not yet. Her eyes hidden behind the curtain of hair tracked the room with the same clinical precision they'd had 24 hours ago. Sergei by the door hadn't moved in 40 minutes, which meant shift change in the 20. Pavel in the corner, with the voltage controller checking his phone every 3 minutes, pattern consistent, attention divided. The generator running on diesel tank capacity, maybe 5 gallons consumption rate at current, load approximately 0.3 gallons per hour, which meant refuel cycle every 16 hours. They'd refueled twice. Once at hour 8, once at hour 20. Patterns. Everything had patterns. Find the pattern, find the weakness. That's what Flint had taught her. The door opened without warning. Konstantin entered carrying a laptop and a folding chair. He set up the chair across from Ainsley, opened the laptop and turned it so she could see the screen. Video footage. Black and white. Grainy. A warehouse. Night vision. Tactical operation in progress. She recognized it immediately. Operation Crimson Dawn. February 2022. The night Flint died. Do you remember this? Konstantin asked. Ainsley said nothing. He pressed play. The footage showed a team moving through the warehouse, 6 operators in full tactical gear weapons up clearing rooms with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times. One of them was smaller than the others, moved differently. That one was her, 23 years old. Navy corpsman attached to a joint task force that shouldn't have existed on any official roster. The camera angle shifted. Now it showed the center of the warehouse, a cache of wooden crates stacked on pallets. Men in civilian clothes guarding them. Russian accents barking orders. Then the shooting started. Muzzle flashes turned the night vision into strobing white chaos. Bodies falling. The tactical team advancing, suppressing, eliminating threats with mechanical precision. And then the camera caught him. Flint Briggs, Gunnery Sergeant, instructor, the man who'd taught her everything about surviving the unsurvivable. He was moving toward the crates when the shots hit him. 3 rounds, center mass, the kind of grouping that spoke of training and intent. He went down. The video showed Ainsley breaking from cover, sprinting across open ground under fire, sliding to her knees beside him. Even in grainy black and white, even through 4 years of distance, she could see her own face in that moment. See the exact second when she realized the wounds were fatal. See her hands moving anyway, applying pressure, trying to stop bleeding that wouldn't stop. See Flint's lips moving. Saying something? The video had no audio. But Ainsley remembered every word. The cache. Coordinates 29.8, north 100, 3.1, west. Destroy it. Bioweapon. If they get it, promise me. Finish this. What is he saying? Konstantin asked, pausing the video on Flint's face. Ainsley's throat was dry. I don't remember. Liar. He said it without anger, just certainty. He is telling you where the cache is. I can see it on your face, the recognition. He was dying. People say a lot of things when they're dying. Not Briggs. Konstantin closed the laptop. Briggs was professional, trained. He would not waste his last words on sentiment. He leaned forward. He told you coordinates, location, how to find what he stole. You're wrong. Am I? Konstantin walked to where Pavel sat with the voltage controller. Let's test your memory. He nodded. Pavel turned the dial. The shock lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, Ainsley was screaming. Not words, just sound. The kind of noise the body makes when pain exceeds the brain's ability to process it. She slumped forward, gasping, strings of saliva hanging from her mouth. The coordinates, Konstantin said calmly. Tell me. She couldn't speak yet, couldn't form syllables. Her tongue felt thick and useless. He waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Again, he said. Wait. The word came out mangled. Wait. Konstantin raised a hand. Pavel's finger hovered over the dial. Ainsley forced her head up, forced herself to look Konstantin in the eye. He told me, she said. Yes. The coordinates. What were they? She gave him numbers, specific, precise, delivered with the flat affect of someone reciting from memory. 31.2 north, 104.5 west. Konstantin studied her face. You're certain? That's what he said. What's there? I don't know. He died before he could tell me. Konstantin's eyes narrowed. He pulled out his phone, typed coordinates into a mapping application. Waited while it loaded. The location showed empty desert. West Texas. Nothing for 20 miles in any direction. There's nothing there, he said. Then maybe he was delirious. Or maybe you need to dig. Konstantin stared at the map, then at her. Then he made a decision. Pavel, Sergei, you will take 3 men. Go to these coordinates. Search within a 5-mile radius. Report every 2 hours. Pavel stood. Boss, what if she's lying? Then she will regret it. Konstantin looked at Ainsley. Won't you? She said nothing. Pavel and Sergei left. The room suddenly felt smaller, with just Konstantin and 2 remaining guards. He pulled his chair closer to Ainsley, sat down, elbows on knees. That was smart, he said. Buying time, hoping for rescue perhaps, or planning escape. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. He smiled. You gave me coordinates that will take 6 hours to check, round trip. During that time, you think maybe your friends come for you. Maybe the SEALs you used to work with. Ainsley's face didn't change. But here is what you don't know, Konstantin continued. We have been watching you for 3 months, since you started volunteering at the border. We know your schedule, your habits. We know you live alone, no family, no close friends. You are, how do you say, a ghost. He was right. That was the worst part. He was absolutely right. No one is coming, Konstantin said gently. And in 6 hours, when my men find nothing at those coordinates, we will start again. Only this time it will be worse. He stood, walked to the door, paused. Get some rest, Corpsman Garrett. You will need it. The door closed. The generator hummed. And Ainsley Garrett, alone in the dark, allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of despair. Then she got back to work. The work of survival, the work of escape, the work of keeping a promise to a dead man. Her eyes moved to the ceiling. Concrete. But old concrete cracked in places. 15 feet up. Too high to reach, even if her hands were free. The walls, reinforced. No windows. The door was steel deadbolt on the outside. The floor, concrete as well, but the chair was bolted down, which meant anchor points, which meant someone had drilled into the floor, which meant the concrete might be weaker there. Her wrists, the zip ties were tight, but zip ties had a weakness. The locking mechanism was plastic. Plastic could break, not with direct force, but with the right angle, the right leverage. She tested it, slowly, carefully, pulling her hands apart while simultaneously rotating them inward. The plastic dug into her skin, drew blood. She kept going, not because she thought it would work immediately, but because doing nothing meant accepting defeat. And Flint hadn't taught her to accept anything. Hour 28, the hallucination started small, a flicker at the edge of her vision. Movement where there shouldn't be movement. Ainsley blinked, focused. Nothing there. Sleep deprivation. The brain trying to fill in gaps, creating patterns from static. She'd studied this, knew the symptoms, knew that around the 30-hour mark without sleep, the visual cortex started misfiring. Knowing didn't stop it. The flicker came again. This time it resolved into a shape. A man, standing in the corner of the room where the shadows pooled deepest. Broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes that had seen violence and made peace with it. Flint, you're not real, Ainsley whispered. The hallucination didn't respond. Didn't need to. It just stood there, arms crossed, watching her with the same patient expression he'd worn during SEER training when she'd failed an exercise for the third time and wanted to quit. Get up, that expression said. We're not done yet. I'm trying, Gunny, she said to the empty room. One of the guards, a new one, younger, looked barely 20, glanced over. What? Ainsley closed her eyes. Nothing. When she opened them again, Flint was gone, but the memory of him remained. The Black Hawk helicopter flew low and dark, running without lights, navigating by terrain, following radar, through West Texas airspace that officially didn't have any helicopters in it tonight. Dalton Mercer sat in the cargo bay, surrounded by his team, watching the desert scroll past through the open door, sand and scrub brush painted gray by starlight. Empty, vast, the kind of landscape that swallowed people and didn't give them back. Somewhere out there, Ainsley was running out of time. 5 minutes. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. Dalton keyed his mic. Team final check. Around him, 5 operators went through their pre-op rituals, checking weapons, adjusting gear, settling into the headspace that turned soldiers into surgical instruments. Garrett Voss, the sniper, was field stripping and reassembling his SR-25 for the 3rd time. Muscle memory. Meditation through repetition. Boone McKenzie cracked his knuckles, then his neck, producing sounds like small-caliber gunfire. Thatcher Kane organized his medical kit with the focused intensity of someone who knew that minutes mattered, that the difference between life and death could be a tourniquet applied 10 seconds faster. Wyatt Hollis had his tablet out, reviewing satellite imagery, thermal scans, radio intercepts, building a 3-dimensional model of the target in his head. Reese Donovan was smiling. He always smiled before an op. Said it kept him loose. LT? Garrett's voice came through the headset. You good? Dalton realized he'd been staring at nothing. He refocused. Yeah. You sure, because you got that look? What look? The look you get when it's personal. It was personal, more than he'd admitted in the briefing. Fallujah hadn't been the only time Ainsley had saved his life. It had just been the most dramatic. But there'd been other moments. Other times when she had been the calm center in the middle of chaos, when her hands had been the difference between someone going home and someone going into a flag-draped box. And after every single one, she'd said the same thing. Just doing my job, LT. Like saving lives was simple. Like courage was routine. 2 minutes, the pilot called. The helicopter banked, dropping lower. The target area came into view, 3 buildings arranged in a loose triangle, dark shapes against darker desert. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures. Lots of them. Wyatt counted. I've got 14 hostiles. Main building, 2 guards outside, the rest inside. Hostage location, Dalton asked. Northwest corner, basement level, single heat signature, not moving much. That would be her. Had to be her. 1 minute. Dalton stood, checked his M4 one last time. Remember the brief. This is a rescue, not a raid. We go in quiet, extract the package, ghost out. No unnecessary contact. And if contact becomes necessary, Boone asked, then we make it very, very short. The helicopter flared, touching down on sand that erupted into a dust storm. The team was out before the skids fully settled, moving in a tactical wedge toward the buildings. Dalton took point. Behind him, the team moved like water flowing around obstacles, silent except for the whisper of boots on sand. 200 meters to the target. 100. 50. The guards outside the main building were smoking rifles slung. Overconfident. Bored. Garrett's voice barely audible. I have both guards. Take them. 2 suppressed shots. The guards dropped without sound. The team reached the building. Boone moved to the door, placed a shaped charge, small, precise, designed to blow the lock without bringing down the wall. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The charge blew with a muffled crack. Boone kicked the door, and Operation Steel went loud. Hour 30. Ainsley heard the explosion. Distant, muffled by walls and concrete, but unmistakable. Her head snapped up. The 2 guards heard it too. They were on their feet, weapons coming up, voices raised in Russian. Then gunfire. Automatic weapons. Close now. Getting closer. The cavalry had arrived. Ainsley's heart rate spiked not from fear, but from hope, which was somehow more terrifying. Hope meant you could still lose something. Fear was just acceptance of what was already gone. The door to her room burst open. Konstantin stood there, pistol in hand, face contorted with rage. Your friends, he said. They're here. I don't have friends. Liar. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pressed the pistol to her temple. The metal was warm. How did they find you? I don't know. You sent a signal. Somehow. More gunfire. Closer. The sound of men shouting, dying. Konstantin's finger tightened on the trigger. This was it. The moment. Either he pulled it or he didn't. Ainsley looked him in the eye. Do it or don't, but stop wasting time. For 3 seconds, the world balanced on a single decision. Then Konstantin lowered the gun. No, he said. You don't get to die easy. He grabbed her by the hair, yanked her head back. You know what Briggs said right before we killed him? He said, she's stronger than all of you. I think he was right. He let go, stepped back, pulled a detonator from his pocket. This building is rigged, Buntin, he said. C4 in the support columns. I push this button, everything comes down. You, me, your rescuers. He smiled. Everyone dies, so I think maybe you tell your friends to leave. Yes. The door behind him exploded inward, not breached, blown. Boone Mackenzie came through the smoke like something summoned from violence itself. M4 up, red laser dot, finding Konstantin's center mass. Drop it. Konstantin's thumb hovered over the detonator button. Standoff. 3 seconds of frozen time. Then Ainsley moved. Even zip-tied to a chair, even after 30 hours of torture, muscle memory was still there. The training Flint had drilled into her until it was deeper than thought. She threw her weight sideways, tipping the chair. It crashed to the floor, pulling her out of Konstantin's immediate line of fire. And Boone took the shot. Single round. Konstantin went to the detonator, clattered across the floor. Boone kicked it away, then moved to Ainsley. Doc, she couldn't speak. Could barely process that this was real. Not another hallucination, not another layer of torture designed to break her. It's okay, Boone said, pulling out a knife, cutting the zip ties. We got you. Her hands came free. 30 hours of circulation restriction meant they barely worked. She tried to stand, couldn't. Boone caught her. Easy, easy. Thatcher. The medic appeared, dropping to his knees beside her. Ainsley, can you hear me? She nodded. Okay. I need to check you over. Can you tell me where it hurts? Everywhere. That's fair. His hands moved over her with professional efficiency, checking pupils, pulse, breathing. Dehydration, shock, burns on the wrists and ankles, possible rib fractures. But you're alive. Basement, Ainsley rasped. There are others. Basement. What? 11 more. Hostages. Sub-level. I heard them. Thatcher keyed his radio. Lieutenant Doc says there are more hostages. Basement level. Dalton's voice came back. We're on it. Get her to the exfil point. Roger. Boone lifted Ainsley like she weighed nothing. Come on, Doc. Time to go home. Not without them, she said. What? The hostages. Not leaving without them. Boone looked at Thatcher. Thatcher looked at Ainsley. Ma'am, you can barely stand. I don't need to stand. She grabbed Boone's vest with fingers that barely worked. I need you to help me not fall over. Now put me down and find them. Doc, that's an order, petty officer. Boone blinked. You are not in the chain of command anymore. Then consider it a really strong suggestion. Despite everything, Boone almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. They found the hatch exactly where Ainsley said it would be. Northwest corner, hidden under a sheet of plywood in a layer of dust. Garrett pulled it open. The smell that came out was wrong. Human waste and fear and desperation baked together in darkness. Jesus Christ, Wyatt whispered. Dalton went down first night vision, painting the scene in shades of green and horror. 11 people, chained to a wall, ages ranging from maybe 8 years old to late 50s. Women, men, a child. They blinked in the sudden light, faces gaunt, eyes hollow. U.S. Navy, Dalton said in English, then repeated it in Spanish. We're here to get you out. The child, a girl, maybe 8, maybe younger, started crying. Not from fear, from relief. Reese, Dalton called. I need those chains cut. Now. The Welshman appeared with bolt cutters, started working the locks with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Dalton moved through the hostages, checking vitals, assessing condition. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, one woman with a fever that suggested infection, another with a cough that sounded like pneumonia, but alive. All of them alive. How long have you been here? He asked in Spanish. A woman mid-30s, hollow-eyed but defiant answered. 2 months, some of us longer. You're safe now. We're taking you home. The woman, the child said suddenly. The nurse, is she okay? Dalton looked at her. You know her. She told me to close my eyes when the bad men came. So I did. Something in Dalton's chest tightened. She's safe. We got her out. Good. The girl nodded solemnly. She was brave. The chains came off one by one. The hostages stood on shaking legs, helped by operators who'd been trained to kill, but now focused entirely on saving. Let's move, Dalton ordered. We have 2 birds inbound. Everyone out. Now. They moved through the building in a convoy of the rescued and the rescuers up from the basement, through rooms where bodies of Bratva soldiers lay in positions suggesting they'd died very quickly and very professionally. Outside, the desert air was cool and clean and filled with the sound of approaching helicopters. Ainsley sat on the ground 20 meters from the building, Thatcher beside her, an IV in her arm, pushing fluids. When she saw the hostages, something in her face changed. Relief, validation. Proof that 30 hours of torture hadn't been for nothing. The little girl, the one from the settlement, broke away from the group and ran to Ainsley. You're okay. She threw her arms around Ainsley's neck. Ainsley hugged back with arms that barely had the strength. You closed your eyes. I did, just like you said. Good girl. The helicopters landed in a storm of dust and noise. The hostages were loaded first, guided by operators who'd gone from hunters to shepherds in the space of minutes. Dalton crouched beside Ainsley. You holding up, Doc? She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much in 30 hours. Dalton. Yeah, thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get you home. The others, they're all out. Every single one because you told us where to look. She nodded slowly. Then we're done here. Not quite. He gestured to the building behind them. Konstantin said, dead. Boone shot him. Good. No emotion, just fact. The detonator? Secured. Building still rigged, but we're clear of the blast radius. Then blow it. Dalton raised an eyebrow. What? The building. Blow it. I don't want anyone else using it for this. He studied her face, saw something there that he recognized. The need to erase. To make sure the place that had tried to break her stopped existing. Reese, Dalton keyed his radio. Set charges. We're demolishing the site. With pleasure, LT. They loaded Ainsley into the second helicopter. Thatcher stayed with her, monitoring vitals, adjusting the IV drip. As the bird lifted off, Ainsley looked down. The building sat below, dark and squat, and filled with nothing but bad memories. Then Reese triggered the charges. The explosion turned night into day for 3 seconds. Fire and debris and the satisfying finality of concrete being reduced to rubble. When the light faded, there was nothing left but a crater. The place where Ainsley Garrett had been tortured for 30 hours ceased to exist. She watched it burn and thought about a promise she'd made 4 years ago. Finish this. Not yet, Gunny. But she was closer. Hour 34. The flight to the nearest military medical facility took 40 minutes. Ainsley spent most of it unconscious. Not from injury, but from the simple fact that her body, given permission to finally stop fighting, had shut down immediately. Thatcher monitored her vitals with the focused attention of someone who'd seen too many people die because nobody was watching the numbers. BP's low but stable, he said into his radio. Heart rate elevated, but that's expected. Dehydration's severe, but we're replacing fluids. She'll need a full workup when we land, but I think she's going to be okay. Dalton, sitting across from them, watched Ainsley's face. In sleep, the hardness that she wore like armor had dissolved. She looked young, vulnerable, like someone who'd been carrying weight she was never meant to carry alone. What happened to her? Thatcher asked quietly. After Flint died? I don't know. She left, submitted discharge papers, and disappeared. People don't usually disappear from the teams. They get pushed or they burn out, but they don't just leave. Yeah. You think it was guilt, survivor's guilt? Dalton thought about the video Konstantin had shown them before Boone put him down. Thought about Ainsley's face in that footage, kneeling beside Flint, trying to save a man who was already gone. I think, Dalton said slowly, she made him a promise, and the weight of it was more than the Navy could hold. The helicopter banked. Below lights appeared the medical facility prepped and ready. They touched down on the helipad. A trauma team was waiting. Ainsley woke as they transferred her to the gurney. Easy, Thatcher said. You're safe. We're at a hospital. The hostages, all safe, all accounted for. Konstantin, dead. She processed this, nodded, closed her eyes again, but before she drifted off, she grabbed Dalton's wrist. The coordinates I gave him, she whispered. They were fake. I know. There is no cache. I know. Flint destroyed it before he died. I watched him. Dalton leaned closer. Then what did Konstantin want? Revenge. He thought torture would break me, would make me give him something that doesn't exist. Her eyes opened, gray as gunmetal, hard as steel. But I didn't break. No, Dalton said quietly. You didn't. Because Flint taught me. Pain is just information, and I already knew everything I needed to know. She let go of his wrist. This time when she closed her eyes, she fell into real sleep. The kind without dreams. The kind that healed. 18 hours later, Ainsley woke in a hospital bed with clean sheets and pain medication, making the world soft around the edges. A doctor she didn't recognize was checking her chart. 50-something kind eyes, the bearing of someone who'd spent a career putting broken people back together. Welcome back, he said. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. Close. You got hit by approximately 53 electrical shocks over a 30-hour period. Also severe dehydration, malnutrition, second-degree burns, 3 cracked ribs, and enough trauma to put most people in therapy for a decade. He set the chart down. But you're going to live. The others, the hostages. All stable. The little girl keeps asking about you. Ainsley managed a small smile. You have visitors, the doctor said. If you're up for it. Who? The door opened. Dalton Mercer walked in, followed by Thatcher Kane, both in civilian clothes now, both looking like they hadn't slept much either. Doc, Dalton said, LT, how you feeling? Like I want to punch whoever invented electricity. Despite everything, Dalton smiled. That's fair. He pulled up a chair, sat down. Thatcher stayed by the door, giving them space, but close enough to intervene if needed. We need to debrief you, Dalton said, but it can wait if you're not ready. I'm ready. You sure? I've had 30 hours to think about what I'm going to say. Ask your questions. Dalton pulled out a small recording device. This is unofficial, off the record, but we need to know what happened. Konstantin wanted information about a weapons cache. He thought Flint told me where it was before he died. Did he? Yes and no. Ainsley shifted in the bed, winced. Flint told me about a bioweapon prototype, stolen from Fort Detrick, hidden in West Texas. But he also told me to destroy it. Did you, Guasa? Yes, 4 years ago, the day after he died. I went to the coordinates, found the king, 1 canister, unmarked. I didn't know what was in it, and I didn't want to know, so I rigged a thermite grenade and turned it into slag. You never reported it. To who? The people who let it get stolen in the first place. She looked at him. Flint died protecting that secret. If I'd reported it, there would have been investigations, tribunals, questions about who knew what and when, and Flint's name would have been dragged through it all. So you destroyed the evidence and left. I destroyed the weapon and kept the promise. There's a difference. Dalton absorbed this. Konstantin thought you knew where the original cache was, still intact. He thought wrong, but he also didn't care about the truth. He cared about revenge. His brother died in the Crimson Dawn op, killed by Flint. So he wanted to hurt what Flint loved. She touched the burns on her wrist. He succeeded, but he didn't break me. No, Dalton said quietly. You're still steel. Flint's steel, not mine. I don't think there's a difference anymore. Ainsley looked away, out the window, at sky that was blue and clean and nothing like the concrete ceiling she'd stared at for 30 hours. What happens now? She asked. You recover. Then you decide. Decide what? What comes next? Command wants to reinstate you. Full rank back, pay the works. No. I left for a reason. That reason hasn't changed. Dalton leaned back. Can I ask what the reason was? Ainsley was quiet for a long moment. Then, you know what the hardest part of being a medic is? What Choosing who to save when you can't save everyone. In Crimson Dawn, there was a girl, 8 years old, daughter of an informant. She got caught in the crossfire, took a round through the abdomen. Ainsley's voice stayed level clinical, but her eyes told a different story. I had Flint bleeding out on my left and this girl bleeding out on my right, and I had to choose. You chose Flint. I chose wrong. The girl died in my arms 30 seconds after Flint did. I couldn't save either of them, but I tried to save him, and she died alone. That's not your fault. I know. Intellectually, I know. But knowing doesn't change the fact that I see her face every time I close my eyes. She looked at Dalton. That's why I left. Because I couldn't keep making those choices. Couldn't keep living with the math of who matters more. So what will you do? I don't know yet, but not this, not anymore. Dalton stood. Take your time, figure it out. But Doc, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, you saved 12 people last night, including a little girl who won't have to learn that sometimes the brave people don't come in time. Because of you, she knows they do. He left. Ainsley sat alone in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped reassurances about heartbeat and blood pressure and all the things that meant she was alive. Alive. Still breathing, still fighting, still trying to keep a promise to a dead man. The door opened again. She expected Thatcher, or a nurse, or someone official. Instead, a little girl with a gap-toothed smile peeked around the frame. Hi, Lily said. Hi. Mom said I could visit for 5 minutes. Is that okay? Ainsley nodded. Lily came in, stood beside the bed. You look better than before. I feel better than before. Did the bad men hurt you? A little, but I'm okay now. Because the SEALs came. Yeah, that's good. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then thank you. For what? For telling me to close my eyes. I didn't see anything scary because of you. Something in Ainsley's chest cracked. Not broke, but shifted. Like a weight she'd been carrying found a different position. You're welcome, she said. Lily smiled, then impulsively hugged her. Ainsley hugged back and thought about the math of who matters. About how maybe there wasn't math. Maybe there were just people. And maybe that was enough. 4 months later. Winter in Virginia had a particular quality of cold that got into your bones and stayed there. The kind that made you understand why people migrated south, why warmth was something worth chasing. Ainsley Garrett stood in front of a classroom of 20 recruits and didn't feel the cold at all. She wore Navy fatigues now. Not because she'd re-enlisted, she hadn't, but because the Navy had made her an offer she'd spent 3 months pretending to consider before accepting. Contract Instructor SERE program, teaching hospital corpsmen and combat medics how to survive what shouldn't be survivable, teaching them what Flint had taught her. The classroom was standard military issue. Concrete block walls painted that particular shade of beige that existed nowhere in nature. Fluorescent lights that hummed with the frequency of low-grade annoyance. Desks arranged in rows. A whiteboard at the front covered in diagrams of pressure points and restraint techniques. 20 faces looked back at her. Ages ranging from 19 to 24. Mixture of genders, backgrounds, reasons for being here. But all of them shared one thing. They'd volunteered to learn how to endure. Good morning, Ainsley said. Good morning, Instructor Garrett, they chorused back. She'd told them not to call her ma'am. Told them she wasn't an officer, wasn't someone who needed the formality. But habits died hard in the military, and respect had its own language. Today we're going to talk about resistance, she said, walking slowly in front of the whiteboard. Not the physical kind, you've already learned that. How to fight, how to escape restraints, how to create weapons from nothing. She held up her hand. The scars on her wrists were visible now, healed but permanent. Thin white lines where zip ties had cut deep. This is from 4 months ago, she said. I was held for 30 hours, tortured, electrically shocked 53 times. And at the end of those 30 hours, I hadn't given my captors a single piece of actionable intelligence. The room was silent. Can anyone tell me why? A hand went up. Male recruit 22 named Carson. Built like he'd played linebacker in high school and brought that aggression with him into the service. Because you're tough, instructor. No, anyone else? Another hand. Female recruit, 19, small frame eyes that suggested she'd already seen more than her age would indicate. Her name was Bryn. Because you had training, instructor. Closer, but still not quite right. Ainsley turned to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. The reason I didn't break is because I had something stronger than pain. She wrote on the board in large letters, purpose. Pain is biology, she said. It's your nervous system screaming that something's wrong. And here's the thing about pain, it's loud. It's overwhelming. It makes you think it's the only thing in the world that matters. She turned back to the class. But it's not. Purpose is louder. The thing you're protecting. The promise you're keeping. The people depending on you to not break. She paused. For me, it was a promise to my mentor. And the knowledge that 11 hostages were in a basement counting on me to survive long enough for help to arrive. Carson raised his hand again. But what if you don't have that? What if you're alone? You're never alone, not really, because even if there's no one physically depending on you in that moment, there are people who trained you, who believed in you, who saw something in you worth teaching. She touched her chest. Carry them with you, their voices, their lessons. When the pain gets too loud, let them be louder. Bryn spoke up without raising her hand. Is it true you were a civilian when they took you? Yes. But you'd been out of the military for 2 years. Wouldn't the training fade? Ainsley shook her head. Training like this doesn't fade. It gets written into muscle memory, into instinct, into the part of your brain that takes over when conscious thought stops working. She walked to Bryn's desk. Stand up. Bryn stood. I'm going to grab your wrist. I want you to break my grip using the technique we learned yesterday. Ready. Bryn nodded. Ainsley grabbed her wrist firm, but not painful. Bryn executed the release perfectly. Rotate, pull, step back. Good. Now I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to startle you first. Don't think, just react. Ainsley clapped her hands together, suddenly loud as a gunshot. Bryn flinched. Ainsley grabbed her wrist. Bryn's body executed the same release. Perfectly. Without thought. That's what training does, Ainsley said, releasing her. It makes the right response automatic. So when you're tired or scared or in pain, you don't have to think, you just do. She returned to the front of the class. This week we're going to put that to the test. Mock interrogation scenarios. You'll be restrained, questioned, subjected to stress positions, loud noise, temperature extremes. Nothing that will cause permanent harm, but everything that will make you want to quit. She looked at each of them. Some of you will break. That's expected. This is training, not the real thing, but when you break, I want you to remember exactly what made you break, because that's your weakness. And once you know your weakness, you can armor it. Carson raised his hand. Did you ever break instructor in training? Ainsley smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. All the time. The first time my mentor put me through a mock interrogation, I lasted 3 minutes before I was crying and begging him to stop. She saw surprise on their faces. The 10th time, I lasted 3 hours. The 20th time, I could go indefinitely. Not because I got tougher, but because I learned what broke me and built walls around it. What broke you? Bryn asked. Isolation. The feeling that no one was coming. That I was alone. Ainsley crossed her arms. So I learned to make myself company, to have conversations in my head with the people who mattered. My mentor, my father, the patients I'd saved. I built a whole room in my mind where pain couldn't reach. She paused. And when Konstantin was torturing me 4 months ago, that's where I lived. In that room with those voices. And he could hurt my body all he wanted, but he couldn't touch that. The classroom absorbed this in silence. Finally, Carson spoke. Will we ever be that strong? You already are. You just don't know it yet. The rest of the class was practical. Wrist restraint escapes, lock-picking basics, how to maintain core temperature in extreme cold, the technical skills that would keep them alive when everything went wrong. But the real lesson, the one Ainsley had learned in a concrete room in West Texas, wasn't about technique. It was about the part of yourself that technique couldn't reach. The part that decided that surrender wasn't an option. Ainsley's office was barely an office. More like a converted storage closet with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a window that looked out over the training grounds. She sat at the desk reviewing training reports when someone knocked. Come in. Dalton Mercer entered, still in civilian clothes, still looking like someone who'd rather be anywhere than behind a desk. He'd stayed in touch over the last 4 months, mostly professional check-ins, making sure she was settling into the instructor role. But there was something else there too, the bond that formed between people who'd been through fire together. LT, she said, what brings you to Virginia? Meetings, briefings, the usual nonsense. He sat down in the chair across from her desk. Thought I'd stop by, see how you're doing. I'm good, teaching suits me. Yeah, he looked around the small office. You don't miss the field. Every day, but I miss not breaking people more. Dalton nodded slowly. The kid, the one from Crimson Dawn. You still see her. Ainsley's pen stopped moving. Every time I close my eyes, that getting better. No, but I'm learning to live with it. She set the pen down. Therapy helps. Turns out the Navy has pretty good mental health resources when you actually use them. Who knew? They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Dalton said, I have something for you. He pulled a folder from his jacket, set it on the desk. Ainsley opened it. Inside, a photograph of a man in his 50s. Hard face, kind eyes. Flint Briggs in dress uniform, every medal and ribbon earned through blood and sacrifice. And beneath the photo, a citation. She read it slowly. It was a posthumous commendation for Flint, recognizing his service, his sacrifice, his contribution to operations that would never be public, but mattered all the same. I thought he already had every medal the Corps could give, Ainsley said quietly. This isn't a medal, it's a memorial. Dalton pointed to the bottom of the citation. They're naming the SERE training facility at Camp Lejeune after him. The Briggs Resilience Center opens next month. Something in Ainsley's throat tightened. He'd hate that, she said, having a building named after him. Probably, but he'd love that it means his methods keep training people, keep saving lives. Ainsley traced the edge of the photograph. I wish he could see this. Maybe he can. You believe in that afterlife stuff? Dalton shrugged. I believe that people who change the world don't really die. They just move into the people they trained. He looked at her. Flint's still here. In you. In every recruit you teach to survive. In every life you save by teaching them what he taught you. That's a nice thought. It's also true. Ainsley closed the folder carefully. Thank you for this. There's more. Dalton pulled out another paper. Command wants you at the dedication ceremony as the keynote speaker. No, but Ainsley, I'm not going to stand in front of a crowd and talk about Flint like I knew him better than anyone else. Other people earned that right too. You're the one he chose to pass it on to. He chose a lot of people. But you're the one still doing it, still teaching, still carrying it forward. Dalton leaned forward. Look, you don't have to decide now, but think about it. It's not about you. It's about making sure everyone who uses that facility knows who Flint Briggs was, and you can tell that story better than anyone. Ainsley looked out the window, at the training grounds, at recruits running obstacle courses and learning to fall without breaking and getting back up because getting up was the only option that mattered. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. Dalton stood to leave, paused at the door. By the way, the hostages you saved, they want to meet you. There's a reunion thing next month in Texas. Beth Turner organized it. I don't need thanks. It's not about thanks. It's about closure. For them and for you. I have closure. Do you? Dalton studied her. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's still fighting a war that ended 4 months ago. He left before she could respond. Ainsley sat alone in her office, surrounded by the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of recruits learning to be harder than the world that would try to break them. She picked up the photograph of Flint, looked into those eyes that had seen everything and still chose to believe in making people better. I don't know if I'm doing this right, Gunny, she said to the empty room, but I'm trying, just like you taught me. The photograph unsurprisingly didn't answer, but somehow that was enough. The community center in Laredo was decorated with the kind of optimistic enthusiasm that came from people who'd survived something terrible and decided celebration was the appropriate response. Balloons, a banner that said "Welcome Home" in English and Spanish, tables loaded with food that smelled like comfort and community. Ainsley stood in the parking lot, hands in her jacket pockets, trying to convince herself to go inside. She'd driven 6 hours from Virginia, taken leave, made all the practical preparations for being here. But the last 20 feet from her car to the door felt impossible. The door opened. Beth Turner stepped out, saw her, smiled. I thought I saw your car, Beth said, walking over. You trying to decide if you're gonna bail? Is it that obvious? Little bit. Beth linked her arm through Ainsley's. Come on, everyone's waiting. I'm not good at this kind of thing. Nobody is. That's what makes it worth doing. Inside the center was full of people. Some she recognized from the settlement, others she didn't. All of them survivors of Konstantin's Operation Freed because a SEAL team had kicked down doors and a woman who'd been tortured for 30 hours had told them where to look. When Ainsley entered, conversation stopped. Everyone turned. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. Ainsley stood frozen, overwhelmed, wanting to disappear into the floor. Beth leaned close. Just smile and wave. They need this. So Ainsley did. Small smile, awkward wave. The applause continued for 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Then people went back to conversations and food and the business of being alive and grateful for it. A girl appeared at Ainsley's elbow. Lily, bigger now somehow. 4 months had added height and confidence and a smile that suggested the nightmares were getting less frequent. "Hi," Lily said. "Hi. Want to see what I made?" "Sure." Lily pulled her to a table covered in drawings. Children's art, crayon and marker, and the kind of perspective that came from seeing the world at eye level with adults' knees. She picked up one drawing. It showed a woman with yellow hair standing in front of a group of people. Behind her, men in black uniforms with guns. Above it all, a sun with a smiley face. "That's you," Lily said, pointing at the yellow-haired woman. "And that's the soldiers who saved us. And that's the sun because we got to see it again." Ainsley looked at the drawing for a long time. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "Really, really, if that's okay." Lily beamed an okay. She ran off already, moving on to the next thing, the next moment, the next piece of childhood that trauma hadn't managed to steal. Ainsley folded the drawing carefully, put it in her jacket pocket. Dr. Fisher approached, looking older than she remembered. 4 months had been hard on him too. "Ainsley," he said, "I wasn't sure you'd come. Wasn't sure I would either. I'm glad you did. We all are." He gestured to the room. 12 people, 12 lives because of you. Because of the SEALs. Because you survived long enough for them to find you. And because you told them about the others." He paused. "How are you doing really?" "I'm okay. Teaching now. SERE program." "That's good. Passing it on." Fisher smiled. "Flint would be proud." "You knew him." "Met him once, years ago, medical conference. He gave a talk on combat trauma care. Brilliant man, hard as nails, but brilliant." "Yeah, he was." They stood in companionable silence, watching the reunion unfold around them. "Can I ask you something?" Fisher said. "Sure." "Was it worth it, the 30 hours, the torture, all of it?" Ainsley looked around the room, at Lily drawing, at Beth laughing with other survivors, at people who were here alive because of decisions made in darkness and pain. "Yes," she said, "it was worth it." The reunion lasted 3 hours. Ainsley spent most of it listening to stories of recovery, of nightmares fading, of lives being rebuilt piece by careful piece. A woman named Carmen, late 40s, had been held in the basement for 6 weeks, told Ainsley about the moment she heard footsteps above and thought it was Konstantin coming back. Then the explosion. Then American voices. "I thought I was hallucinating," Carmen said. "Thought my mind had broken and I was imagining rescue. But then this big man came down the stairs and said, 'U.S. Navy,' and I knew it was real." "Dalton," Ainsley said. "Lieutenant Mercer." "Yes, he carried my daughter up the stairs. She couldn't walk, too weak, and he just picked her up like she weighed nothing and brought her to the light." Carmen's eyes were wet. "You gave us that. You and those men." "I just survived. They did the saving." "No, you gave us hope because we heard you, through the walls, when they were hurting you. We heard you not screaming, not begging, and we thought if she can endure that, we can endure this." Ainsley hadn't known, hadn't realized the walls were thin enough to hear through, hadn't understood that her silence had been its own form of communication. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," she said. "Don't be. It's what kept us strong." As the reunion wound down, Beth pulled Ainsley aside. "Thank you for coming," Beth said. "I know it wasn't easy." "It was good, seeing everyone okay. Lily talks about you all the time, tells everyone at school about the brave nurse who saved her." "I didn't save her. The SEALs did." "You told her to close her eyes. That was the first save. Everything else came after." Beth hesitated. "She wants to be a nurse now, because of you." "She said she wanted to be a veterinarian. She changed her mind, says nurses are braver than vets because they help people who can fight back." Despite everything, Ainsley smiled. Kid logic. The best kind. They walked out together into a parking lot painted orange by sunset. "Will you come back?" Beth asked. "Next year we're making this an annual thing." "Maybe, if I can." "You'd better. You're kind of the guest of honor." Ainsley got in her car, started the engine, looked back at the community center. Through the windows, she could see people still inside, still talking, still being alive together. 12 lives, plus her own. 13 reasons why 30 hours of torture had been worth surviving. She drove away as the sun set, heading back toward Virginia and the classroom where tomorrow she'd teach 20 recruits how to be harder than the world that would try to break them. The Briggs Resilience Center at Camp Lejeune was exactly the kind of building Flint would have hated. Too new, too clean, too official. But the name over the door made it worthwhile. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs Resilience Center, steel sharpens steel. Ainsley stood in front of 300 people, officers, enlisted civilians, press, and tried to remember how to breathe. Public speaking wasn't her strength. Never had been. She was better one-on-one teaching in classrooms, working with her hands. But Dalton had been right. This wasn't about her. She looked down at her notes, then folded them and put them in her pocket. Notes were for people who needed reminders. She didn't need reminders. She had memories. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs was my mentor, she began. Her voice echoed in the cavernous space. But before he was my mentor, he was a lot of other things. Marine Scout sniper, instructor. The kind of man who could break you down to components and build you back stronger. She paused. He was also the best friend of my father, who died in Fallujah in 2004. And when I joined the Navy 13 years later, Flint made a promise to my dad. He promised he'd look after me. The crowd was silent. Looking after him, in Flint's world, meant making me tougher than I thought possible. It meant SERE training that left me crying and exhausted. It meant learning to shoot until my hands bled. It meant understanding that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being the one who refuses to quit. She looked up at the building behind her. This center will train thousands of people over the years. It'll teach them techniques, skills, the practical knowledge of how to survive capture and torture and the worst moments humans can inflict on each other. She stepped forward, closer to the crowd. But the real lesson Flint taught me wasn't technical. It was philosophical. He taught me that pain is just information, that purpose is louder than suffering, that the person you are when everything's been stripped away, that's your true self. And if you build that self on steel, nothing can break you. Her voice strengthened. 4 months ago, I was captured by people who wanted to break me. They tortured me for 30 hours straight, 53 electric shocks, no food, no sleep, no mercy. She held up her wrists, showed the scars. They tried everything to make me talk, but I didn't. Not because I'm special, not because I'm tougher than anyone else, but because Flint Briggs spent years teaching me that breaking is a choice, and I chose not to. She lowered her hands. Because of that choice, 11 hostages were rescued, 12 lives saved, including my own. And all of it traces back to a man who believed that teaching people to survive was the highest calling he could answer. She gestured to the building. This center is Flint's legacy. Every person who trains here, every life saved because of what they learn here, is him continuing to serve, continuing to protect, continuing to make the world safer by making the people in it stronger. Her voice drop became more personal. Flint died 4 years ago in West Texas. I was with him. His last words were, "Finish this." At the time, I thought he meant the mission, the operation, the tactical objective. She paused. But now I understand. He meant finish the work, the teaching, the building of people who can endure. He meant pass it on. She looked directly at the crowd. So that's what I'm doing, what all of us are doing. We're finishing what Flint started. And as long as this center stands, as long as we keep training people to be steel, he's not really gone. She stepped back. Flint used to say that pain is temporary, but decisions are permanent. The decision to build this center, to honor his name, to continue his work, that's permanent. That's legacy. That's how we thank him for everything he gave us. She nodded to the commander standing beside the podium. Thank you for letting me be part of this. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. Ainsley walked off the stage legs, shaking, adrenaline fading. Dalton met her at the bottom of the stairs. That was good, and he said, that was terrifying. Same thing sometimes. They walked together toward the building, away from the crowd. You think he would have approved? Ainsley asked. Of the building, no. Of you, absolutely. Inside the center, the walls were already decorated with photographs. Flint in various stages of his career. Older and harder in Iraq. Teaching, training, building people. One photograph showed him with a group of students. Ainsley was in that group. 21 years old, looking uncertain and determined in equal measure. Flint's hand was on her shoulder. She stood in front of that photograph for a long time. I kept my promise, Gunny, she said quietly. I finished it, and I'm going to keep finishing it. Every recruit I train, every life I help save. That's you, still working, still protecting. The photograph didn't respond, but she felt something, a sense of rightness, of completion. Not closure, she'd never have that, but acceptance. The understanding that grief and purpose could occupy the same space. that you could miss someone and honor them simultaneously. That steel once forged didn't forget its shape. 6 months later, back to the classroom. Bryn stood at the front of the training room, breathing hard, hands still zip-tied behind her back. She'd just completed her final SERE exercise. 4 hours of simulated capture, stress positions, loud noise, mock interrogation, and she hadn't broken. Ainsley cut the zip ties, helped her straighten up. "How do you feel?" Ainsley asked. "Like I got hit by a truck." "Good answer. Now, tell me what you learned." Bryn thought about it. "That I'm stronger than I thought." "Wrong. You were always this strong. What you learned is that you can access that strength when everything else is gone. Is that what you did when Konstantin had you? Every second of every hour." Ainsley handed her a bottle of water. "The pain tried to drown me, but I had voices louder than the pain. My mentor, my father, the patients I'd saved. They became a room in my mind where torture couldn't reach. How do I build that room? By deciding what matters more than comfort, more than safety, more than your own life." Ainsley paused. "You have to find your steel, Bryn, the thing in you that doesn't bend, and then you protect it like it's the last light in the world." Bryn nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand." "Good, because next week we go again. Longer, harder, until it becomes automatic." "Will it ever stop being scary?" Ainsley smiled. "No, but you'll learn to be scared and do it anyway. That's what courage is." The rest of the class filed in, ready for debrief. Ainsley stood at the front, these 20 recruits who'd become her responsibility, her purpose, her way of finishing what Flint had started. "Today, 12 of you completed the final exercise without breaking," she said. 8 of you broke at various points. That's a 75% pass rate. Last class was 50%. The class before that was 40. She let that sink in. "You're getting better, stronger, more resilient. And it's not because I'm a better teacher than my predecessor. It's because you're learning that strength isn't about genetics or luck. It's about choice." Carson raised his hand. "Instructor, what happens if we face something worse than training? Something we're not prepared for?" "Then you do what I did. You find the thing that matters more than the pain, the promise, the purpose, the people depending on you." She touched her chest. "And you let that be louder than everything trying to break you." She dismissed them. They filed out exhausted and proud, and already becoming the kind of people who could survive the unsurvivable. Ainsley was gathering her notes when her phone buzzed. A text from Dalton. "Thinking about you. Hope teaching is going well. Remember, you're not just training them. You're Flint, still protecting people, still making the world safer. Hooyah." She typed back, "Hooyah." Then she looked up at the photograph on her desk. Her and Flint. Desert sunset. 4 years ago and forever ago and yesterday. "We're doing it, Gunny," she said, "finishing what you started, one recruit at a time." She picked up her jacket, headed for the door. Tomorrow she'd do it again. Teach, train, build people into steel. Because that's what Flint had done for her. And the only way to honor that was to pass it on. The only way to survive losing him was to become him, not his replacement, his continuation. She walked out into the Virginia evening, where the air was cold and clean, and filled with the sounds of a military base settling into night. Somewhere recruits were studying, preparing, building themselves into the kind of people who could endure. And Ainsley Garrett, 27 years old survivor, instructor, keeper of promises, went home, knowing that tomorrow she'd help them become steel. Because steel sharpens steel. Because pain is temporary, but decisions are permanent. Because Gunnery Sergeant Callahan Briggs had taught her that breaking was a choice, and she chose not to, every single day, for the rest of her life.